Today I have with me a man known for his work on both writing and voice acting in shows like Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Dave the Barbarian, and currently the 7D, Mr. Paul Rugg.
Hello.
And how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great, thank you, sir. Thank you for asking.
I have to be polite. I have to ask.
Well, that's and so far you've done wonderfully. I feel quite enchanted.
No, thank you, sir. Will there be anything else for you?
No.
Hey, so, what is it that got you into the business as a whole?
Um, gosh, I went, I majored in writing at Loyola Marymount University, which means I basically am qualified to do absolutely nothing. Um, and so I sort of, you know, scooted around after college with different odd jobs. I was a production manager at the ABC radio network for talk radio for like 3 years. And then I joined an improv group and really, really, really liked it. And sort of went around from improv group to improv group. And then when I joined the Acme Comedy Theater, they were hiring for Animaniacs. They had just developed Animaniacs, and so that's basically I got hired off of doing improv.
Hmm. And what was it like writing for Animaniacs? Because that was like one of your first big things, and that's a big show.
Yeah, well, that was my first real writing job. It was great. It was great particularly because I was sort of a newbie and I didn't know about rules and there weren't any. So that sort of went perfectly well with with working at Warner Brothers. We didn't have today in today's world. There are, a myriad of executives, and there are a myriad of managers, and scripts are sort of batted around from one manager to the next. Everybody's sort of having their idea, but on Animaniacs, we only had to please two people really, and number one was Tom Ruger, who was our executive producer, who is just an incredibly smart guy. And then we had to make Steven Spielberg happy. Beyond that, it didn't matter what anyone thought. And things aren't like that in today's world, but back then, um, it was just great. For instance, and I've said this a number of times, and I'm sort of beating a dead horse, but I'll do it anyway. If you write a script today for different shows, you go from a premise, which is like a paragraph of today this'll happen, and then you expand that into an outline, which basically says exactly what is going to happen. Like this'll happen, and then that'll happen, and then that'll happen, and you've basically written it in an outline form, sometimes with a little dialogue. And then from that, after that's approved, then you'll write a script. On Animaniacs, we would go into Tom Ruger and say, "Hey, today I want to have the Warners go up against Einstein." It'll be like, "Great, okay, that's due in a week and a half. Okay, bye, bye, bye. See you later. Okay, bye. Have a good time." And then we write it, uh, and that's how we wrote Animaniacs.
Hmm.
It was just sort of here's the idea, stream of conscious. More than I would say, more than 50% of the time, I would get to page five and go, "Nah, this isn't working," and I would go back to square one again and sort of uh, refine or sort of retool what the episode was about. But if we were working off of an outline, we'd have to get that idea approved and stuff. And so Animaniacs was free form. It was great, and it was awesome. Have I made myself clear?
Yes. If I
Yeah,
made myself
it was
clear,
great.
sir, don't ever ask me that question again. Now, was it the same with Freakazoid or Dave the Barbarian or things like that?
Yeah, Freakazoid was almost even more free form because the show had been sort of developed by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm as sort of an edgy superhero show, which was really good. So sort of like imagine Batman with some laughs, but really at its core, it was very superhero-ish. And Steven, because he would because Steven Spielberg is our executive producer was so used to Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, he wanted it to be a little bit more out there. And Paul Dini and Bruce Timm were like, that's not really our thing. So Tom Ruegger sort of took over, and this is like in January. We were going to air in September. He sort of pointed at John McCann and I and said, and John McCann being a very funny comedy writer who I worked with on Animaniacs, and he said, "Okay, you two are my Freakazoid guys. Let's just start writing. I don't really know what this is, but let's just go." And that's what we did. So it was super. There are no outlines. Just write. Just start writing. And in writing, we sort of found what the show was about.
Now, I was curious because you were Freakazoid, and
Hmm.
Freakazoid had a normal person identity, which was played by David
Right.
Kaufman. Now, was it
Right.
intended for Freakazoid to have two voices? Was David Kaufman going to play Freakazoid, or were you going to play both characters?
No, it was always intended for it to be two different characters. Um, and David Kaufman sort of had that great sort of teen quality, and he was hired, I think, way before we had figured out what the voice of Freakazoid was. So that was sort of set in stone.
Because I was curious because again it was two voices and I was just curious if that was the case.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, it was
now,
always planned that way.
now I'm curious because watching Freakazoid, I'm curious. Did you improvise a lot on that show, or was it like written? Like, because
It was very well written. On the very first episode, which was basically my audition, and I didn't know it was my audition. It was the episode called Dance of Doom with Cave Guy, and he basically takes a bunch of kids hostage at their high school prom. Um, we did it, and we recorded it as John McCann had written it, and it was very, very funny. But Tom Ruegger, our executive producer, started asking me to just go off. And so we would sort of do a page, and then he'd say, "Okay, now we're going to do the page, and then you should. I want you to just go off." And I'm like, "Why do you want me to go off?" He says, "Just go off." So I started going off, and screaming and yelling, and I mean, burning literally, like 20 minutes of digital audio time, and I thought that that was just sort of to give everyone an idea of how loose it could be. But then what Tom Ruegger did was he took a lot of that and mixed it in with the standard script. And from then on, um, we would sort of write Freakazoid's outbursts. Some stuff like I think there's an episode called yeah, no, there is an episode called Candle something. I don't want to say it because bad things will happen. But there's a piece in the very middle where Freakazoid just sort of stops the scene, and he walks around to all the actors like Ed Asner, and he starts talking. And that was just sort of an improvised silly thing. And Tom Ruegger took most of that stuff always, and sort of put it in the storyboard. But then, as we sort of got to know the character more, we would write those silly things into the script, and there wasn't a need to necessarily improvise anymore.
hmm. 'Cause I was gonna say because one, that's one of the funniest shows I've ever seen, and two, it was written.
Oh, right.
That's the case. It's amazingly written because I thought a majority of your
Oh,
scenes were improv.
well, no, I mean, I think after Candlejack, we didn't really do any more improvising. I mean, we would go off on a few things, but really nothing major. We would just start writing in a very stream of conscious way, and which really was played to our strengths because I was in the Acme Comedy Theater with John McCann. Improvising was in our background, but also was just being really silly. And when we figured out that Freakazoid is just silly stuff, stories really don't matter. In fact, on a number of occasions, we would write the whole episode, just have fun, and realize, like on the last page, oh my gosh, we got to wrap this up. So we would either wrap it up with an impression of Paul Harvey, who used to be an old radio announcer who used to tell stories, and but we would just think about some way to just let's just wrap this thing up. But yeah, I mean, I think Freakazoid was the most fun I ever had writing because first of all, people when they would read the scripts, they'd be like, "I have no idea what this is," and we'd be like, "Okay, great, perfect. Let's just keep recording."
Now, I'm curious because again, every show I think you've written for, you've doubled as a like you've been a voice on it. Like you were Mr. Director, you were Freakazoid, you were Chuckles, like all these different shows. Now,
Yeah.
did you go in an audition or did they like come up to you and ask like, "Hey, do you want to be a voice?"
Mostly they asked. I think the first time I ever did a voice was was it Einstein? Yeah, I think it was Einstein in a Warner's cartoon, probably like the third one I'd ever written, called Cookies for Einstein. And Tom Rugers, because he had seen me perform at the Acme Theater, and he knew I could do some accents. He said, "You just do it." So that was my first time, and then because I would do Jerry Lewis around the office constantly and annoy everyone, um, Tom Ruger said, "Hey, why don't you do one where they sort of come against that a Jerry Lewis sort of character?" So based on all that, they would just say, "Hey, why don't you why don't you just voice this one? We don't know what it is." So for those shows, I never really auditioned. I've auditioned for other things that I haven't necessarily been a writer on. And on Dave the Barbarian, I wasn't really a writer. I think I'm credited with writing one, but that was just because I sort of helped Dub come up with that idea for that specific episode. But I didn't ever really write on Dave the Barbarian because it was much too clever for me. It was really good. That show was just really fun because you would come in. Doug Langdale had written such awesome scripts, and we had Kevin Michael Richardson, I think Frank Welker, Tress McNeil. That was some of the most fun recording I think I've ever had was on Dave the Barbarian.
I missed that show so much.
Me too.
I think it was like it only had I think 2 seasons, like maybe a
Yes.
season.
Yeah. Right. Right. And now Doug Langdale, who is the creator of that and executive producer of that, he's the executive producer of Puss in Boots,
Hmm.
that I have a voice in. So and Puss in Boots sort of carries on that sort of Dave the Barbarian, really funny, really witty dialogue.
Now, was 7D the same thing? Like, did you audition for Starch Bottom or did they ask?
Tom Ruger called and said, "I want you to come and audition for Starch Bottom." But when I went to audition, I was in a room of about 10 other guys, all of them very good, who were auditioning for the role of Starch Bottom. So I definitely had to audition for that one,
Hmm.
and luckily, it all worked out.
Right. Now, is it was it hard for you to start voice acting at first, or was it like were you like did you like just get into it really quick?
No, it's funny. I think what I learned is that I have a specific sort of voice. Like I'll be the insane guy. I'll be like if you think of like Chuckles, the Dark Lord, the silly piggy,
Hmm.
that's sort of like okay, let's get Rug. But I've learned in sort of auditioning that there are so many people out there like Jeff Bennett, like Rob Paulson, like Maurice LaMarche and stuff that there's stuff that I'm just not going to audition for because I wouldn't get it. So I have learned to sort of do my thing. I'm not that good at an impressionist. Um, and in fact, there's a guy that I work with now on Puss in Boots, who's literally one of the most talented people I think I've ever met. His name is Eric Bauza.
Oh,
Um,
I interviewed Eric.
yeah, Eric is stunning. He just is like sometimes he'll be doing his thing, and I'll stare, and my jaw will open because his range is incredible. So I guess a long answer to your question is I know what I shouldn't do.
Oh gosh, I'm Eric is one of those people that I honestly miss talking to. It's like that was oh, I love Eric so much.
Yeah, yeah. Eric is just awesome. He's Puss in Boots uh for the Netflix show that I do with him, and
Wow.
his timing is stunning.
Like he is amazing, and I was thinking they were gonna get like, because I think there was a guy before Andre Luizo that
Right,
was like the
right.
double for Puss for a long time. So I thought they were gonna get him back. So I was shocked to see Eric do that.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, but I'm not quite sure what happened or what, but I just know that just sort of watching Eric do it is just amazing. And I've worked with him on some other stuff. He does a voice on a new show that I'm doing at Nickelodeon. He sort of comes in from time to time, but that's a show that I can't talk about yet. So
Right?
see, I've learned my lesson. I can't talk
Yay!
about that show.
Like, so with Animaniacs, there's one thing that I think a lot of people still talk about outside of it being, well, a very great show, is the dirty humor.
Uh-huh.
And I have to bring that up. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think there are like three specific, and let's call it naughty. There are like three things in there that were sort of put in, um, and I think because I didn't put any of those in, and I won't tell you who did, but I think it was put in to sort of like, oh, that's pretty funny. When the censor reads that, they'll kick it back, and then we'll go with what we really were going to say there, and it never got kicked back. So
like
it was like, well, all right, let's just keep going.
it's like
So
that. It's insane some of the jokes they got away with.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess that sort of is a testament to Rob Paulson's delivery and Tress McNeil's delivery as Dot. Just the innocent way things are said, it just goes whoosh, right over your head.
Oh gosh, it's like it just comes like all these different jokes come to mind. It's seriously just amazing because you could never get away with jokes like that nowadays on kids shows.
No, 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 you couldn't. And you know what? To be honest with you, when we were writing those shows, um, I I I can almost remember only one time Tom Ruger said, "Hey, I don't think a kid's gonna get that." And it was some probably really weird reference that I had done. But when you think about Animaniacs, that was pretty much written for us. We would write that for each other, and we never really thought about kids per se, which is sort of the Warner Brothers way. Um, the Warner Brothers way is, if you have three kids in a room, one is 18, one is 12, and one is 5, and they're all watching this show. If a 5-year-old doesn't get the joke, but he sees the 12-year-old and the 18-year-old laughing, he'll ask why. And that's sort of the Warner Brothers way. We'll, listen to your elders and they'll explain the joke to you. And then the next time something like that happens, you'll understand. Um, which nothing is really written like that anymore. But that was sort of the Warner Brothers way. Always play to the smartest person in the room.
Because I think like Looney Tunes was famous for that.
Yeah, right, right, right. I mean, when you think about the Looney Tunes, those were all shorts that were done before, very adult movies in the 40s and 50s, like Casablanca. And there weren't a lot of kids in the audience for Casablanca.
Yeah, and there's one thing I discovered that intrigued me because I saw this when I was looking through your filmography, and there was something called Puppet Up in there,
Yes, yes.
like that, which was like that Muppet project. And how did you get involved in that?
You know what? That's such a very good question. I have a very strange career. About 10 years ago, right, I think it was right as Freakazoid was ending. I sort of hooked up with the Jim Henson Company, and they asked me to write a pilot for them.
Hmm.
And so I wrote a pilot, and everybody liked it and stuff. It was never eventually sold, but they were very happy with it. And then based on that, they sort of knew that I had a very sort of an extensive improv background. So when Brian Henson was thinking about doing Puppet Up, which is basically improv using puppets, they invited me to sort of come to some workshops and learn puppetry. So the first time I ever went, I think it was in 2004 or maybe later, maybe 2005. I sat in this room with the best puppeteers in the world. And it's like, okay, Paul, get up here now and grab a puppet and let's do some improv. And I was so nervous. I'm like, what am I? I don't know how to do this. So I think I grabbed a penguin that just had a mouth. Um, and then slowly but surely they sort of trained me, and I'm still learning. I just did a pilot with them a while back, doing traditional puppetry, and there's so much to learn because these people can take a puppet, and what they can do with it is, it's like sort of like watching Eric Bauza. What they can do with just some foam and some felt, and to have you think that it's got all these emotions and stuff is just stunning. So the long answer to the question is, I sold them a pilot a while back, and now they want me to sort of do Puppet Up with them. So that's how I got started.
Hmm. No, because Pac-Man, the Pac-Man Goes to the Adventures cartoon is some of the Animaniacs crew, correct?
Um, you know what? Tom Ruger and I just sort of wrote the pilot for them,
Hmm.
but I don't think there's anybody else on it. Um, yeah,
Oh, because
I,
I
I
thought
don't
it was a few
I don't
people.
really know. Yeah.
Because I know 7D is like a majority of people back from
Yes.
Animaniacs.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And what's it like working with all of them on like one project again?
It was great. I'm not currently writing for them anymore because writing is hard, and I've sort of retired a little bit from the writing because after 20 years, you're just sort of like, wow, that's really tough. But the first season I did with them, and it was great. I mean, it was Sherry Stoner, it was Deanna Oliver, Tom Ruger, and it was sort of like, the same way that we used to write it before, which, you wander into other people's offices and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of a joke. What do you think of this?" And then, Dan Oliver will say, "No, I don't think that's good. You should change it," or sort of how we used to do stuff. So that was great, and it was really great to work with Tom Ruger again.
Right, and I gotta say thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Is there any advice you can give to people that are interested in getting into the whole like business?
Ah, boy, that's a very good question. Yeah, if you want to get into it because it's a lot of work. There's a guy named Corey Burton. I don't know if you know Corey Burton, but
Oh,
but he's like
I love Corey.
he's an yeah, he's an amazing voiceover guy, and he once said probably the wisest thing I ever heard, which is, if this is what you want to do, then you have to risk everything to do it. And which is, I think, and work on it and hone it. And so that would be my advice.